Good Thursday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're having a good afternoon. Browns back at it in Berea. Getting ready to head to Washington, D.C. to face the Commanders coming up Sunday. Some good news. Nick Chubb was back on the practice field yesterday. Browns have 21 days to activate him to the active roster. No word just yet on when exactly that will be. Chubb was asked today about being back at practice.
Yeah, it felt good to get back out there with the guys. It's been almost a complete year, so it's been a long time of me not being out there. So it felt great to get out there.
How's the knee feel? Did it feel normal out there?
It felt good. I've been doing things on my own for a while now, so I've been used to everything I've done out there. But it feels good.
Were you battling any rust yesterday? Like getting back, just kind of in the drills?
Maybe a little bit. I haven't been with Deuce yet. Deuce, he's a different animal, so his drills are a lot different than what we've done in the past. So just getting used to that.
And again, that's Nick Chubb today. Let's welcome in Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Tim, would doubt, you never know, but I would doubt Chubb is activated for this game. Maybe the Eagles, more likely that third game, the Bengals after that.
Yeah, I don't think there's much of a need to rush Nick Chubb back. I know the team's obviously struggling at 1-3. They dropped 2 games against teams that I think everybody thought they should have won, that they certainly probably shouldn't have lost. But I think with Nick Chubb, considering how significant the knee injury was, that he had to have 2 surgeries, I don't think you rush that just because the team's struggling. You bring him back, I think, kind of when he's able to. And the big thing with Nick Chubb coming back, I think some of the guys were talking about it yesterday, just it feels like because Nick Chubb is so important to this team, we saw the emotional impact he had when he came out of the Batman mask in Week 17 last year against the Jets to smash the guitar. The Browns certainly picked up that lead and had that hot start to beat the Jets and clinch that playoff spot. I would have to imagine just getting Nick Chubb back on the practice field. That's got to be an emotional lift for a team that really needs one.
So this is something to take a look at. Browns, they have to get their running game going without question, and it should be this week. Washington has allowed the second highest yards per carry average, over 5.3. They've allowed 100 yards rushing in every game this season. 181 yards last week against the Arizona Cardinals, led by Connor. And the Browns' only win was their only 100-yard rushing game. That was Week 2 against the Jaguars. Connecting the dots, they're going to have to run the ball.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing we've talked about, throughout the season so far is not only are they not running the ball well, they're not trying to run the football. Even looking at Pro Football Reference, they have just 88 carries in 4 games this season. That's 29th in the NFL, and they're 4.3 yards a run. So that's kind of middle of the pack. But you look at Jerome Ford, for example, he's not even getting 10 carries a game right now. He's at just 39 carries. I mean, say what you will, but bottom line is they need to commit to running the football. I know it's been a struggle. I know they really struggled against a Raiders team that was really bad at defending the run. But the fact is, I think you still have to try. The bottom line is you still have to try. And you would have to imagine if they can get Jedrick Wills and Jack Conklin back this week, that should help. Getting those starting offensive linemen back should make things more effective when running the football, because again, last week they were basically down to one of their normal starting offensive linemen from Week 1 last year in Joel Bitonio. That was it. I mean, you had a rookie in Zach Zinter, you had DeJuan Jones who still doesn't look 100%, and then you had James Hudson and Nick Harris out there. So I mean, that's tough to run with as an offensive line, but you're the Browns, you're Kansas fans, you got to simply figure out a way to get this run game going. It just has to, because with Deshaun Watson still working his way back, still trying to kind of get his footing, and with the issues the passing game has had sometimes as far as pass protection and creating time for Watson to get throws off, you got to be able to run a football and at least establish some semblance of the identity of years past.
Well, along those lines, take a look at this. So far in 2024, the Browns have 14 drop passes. That's most in the NFL. They've been blitzed 47 times, third most. They've given up 19 sacks. That's the most. They have 257 yards rushing by their running backs. That's the least. They've scored 66 total points, sixth fewest, 15.0 point per game average on offense. That's tied for third fewest. Those are numbers that you're not going to win many games unless you dramatically improve on them.
Yeah, and the one number that isn't on there, they're dead last in the NFL in third down percentage, looking at just 20.8%. If you're not converting a third down better than 1 out of 4 or even 1 out of 3 times, you're just not going to move the football. And I think the bottom line is this offense really through 4 games, I don't know if there's really anything you can really hang your hat on, because really nothing has worked consistently. I think it does start with the fact that this offensive line has not been healthy. They really haven't played well, and then just guys not making plays, stepping up, and really being consistent. I mean, obviously, Amari Cooper last week with that big drop that turned into an interception. There really hasn't been much in the receiving game outside of Jerry Jeudy looking good in some scramble situations. David Njoku being out the last 3 games certainly hasn't helped. But the bottom line is this is an offense that just has not really shown anything they're really that good at. And quite honestly, if you're Kevin Stefanski, Ken Dorsey, Andy Dickerson, you got to go back into the lab and figure out something that you can build on. And just figure out some way to be productive, because if you're not going to score in the NFL, I don't care how good your defense is, you're not going to win a lot of games if you don't move the football and you don't put points on the board. It's still in some ways an offensive game.
So overreactions for every NFL team after 4 weeks. This from CBSSports.com. Browns, Amari Cooper is playing his way out of Cleveland. Overreaction or reality? They say overreaction. Cooper has struggled 3 of the 4 games he's played, having less than 40 yards in those contests. Doesn't have a 100-yard game yet either, but he does have 2 TDs. Last year of his contract, Cleveland could trade Cooper if the season gets out of hand. With Chubb out, Cooper is easily the best offensive weapon. Browns need their top playmakers back. Things will then open up for Cooper. Well, they haven't had Chubb or Njoku. They had Njoku for the first half of that Cowboys game. So, and Cooper hadn't played well. So your top 3 playmakers are not doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, and I mean, the NFL more than any other level of football is about the Jimmies and the Joes, not the X's and the O's. And again, like you said, 2 of their 3 best offensive playmakers have not been available, or in Njoku's case, have barely been available because of injury. Amari Cooper had that one good game against the Giants, but then again against the Raiders, we all saw that ball that hit him right in the chest between 4 defenders. I think it was 4 or 5 defenders, and then got intercepted. I feel like that's kind of an unfortunate metaphor, and an unfortunate for the Browns, the kind of the season in a nutshell, where as soon as they do something good, something bad happens to it. And I keep thinking in my mind that 82-yard touchdown to Amari Cooper, if Nick Harris is not flagged for holding, we're having a completely different conversation. We're talking about Deshaun Watson makes the play that the Browns and their fans have waited years to see him make. Nobody's talking about Amari Cooper's struggles because, oh my goodness, he made this very long touchdown. The Browns finally have a 300-yard game. They finally have 20+ points. They're 2-2. But that holding penalty took that away, and in that game, particularly against Vegas, I think just a situation where they just have not been able to sustain prosperity even within the same play. So it's not just Amari Cooper; it's really the whole operation that needs to be more consistent.
So Jim Schwartz met with media today, talked about what he has seen from his defense.
It's probably more than just sloppy tackling. We have generally been a couple series of sloppy play, and we shouldn't have to get kicked in the teeth to start playing, because when we do start playing, the last 2.5 quarters against Dallas, ridiculously. I mean, but you can't erase those series before that. Giants, fumble, punt, miss field goal, really good stuff. And same thing with this, like getting the ball back for our offense, scoring on defense. But that gets erased by the sloppy play. And until we get that consistency, we're going to play like a 1-3 football team, and we're playing like a 1-3 defense.
And Tim, I would say that the things that are happening to him are what happened to teams that are 1-3. You have a penalty at the wrong time. You have a tipped pass becomes a turnover. You end up, shooting yourself in the foot. And instead of 1st and 10, it's 1st and 20, 1st and 15. Those are what the NFL, the margin of victory and the margin of very slim, those things tilt it towards losing.
100%. I mean, it's hard enough to win in the NFL, and it's almost impossible when you're making those self-inflicted mistakes. I mean, talking about what Jim Schwartz was talking about with sloppy play, we saw a lot of it, in the Raiders game, a lot of missed tackles, getting blown off the ball repeatedly by a Raiders run game that wasn't just the worst in the league coming in, it was historically bad. I think it was like just 51 yards a game, and then they go around and torch the Browns for 152 on the ground. I mean, that comes down to sloppiness, like Jim Schwartz was saying. Maybe they need to bring that intensity more than just the end of the game. They need to start the game that way, because the Browns offense has been starting games well, but then as the game progresses, they get sloppy as well, and they struggle to make adjustments. And then by the time, they finally get things going again, they're in a position where they need to score to win the game, and they just can't get it done. Defense, same kind of thing. They need to start better and take that energy they've had in the third quarter, in the second half of the game, particularly the fourth quarter against the Raiders, where I thought, they were able to make some stops. They got off the field. The second half against the Giants, the same thing. You got to be able to start the game like that and set a tone. This team's got to be more consistent and more clean if they want to win, especially on the road in the NFL.
All right, before we go to break, Alex Wright, this one didn't really see coming. He announces on his Instagram that he's going to miss the rest of the season with a torn tricep. He'll undergo surgery also today. Brown's not practicing David Njoku. That was always the plan after practicing Wednesday. James Hudson, right shoulder. Jordan Hicks, elbow triceps. And of course, Wright that we talked about. And Alex Wright, that hurts a little bit, Tim. Myles Garrett is less than 100%. Alex Wright was stepping in there. You're starting to get a little bit of attrition on the defensive end, the edge rushers.
Yeah, and we saw at the end of last season, just Alex Wright seemed like he was really coming along the learning curve. When he got drafted in 2022, I think we all kind of understood that he was very raw and had to work on his game a little bit, and he started to really develop into a pretty solid, defensive end who's good at defending the run, holding the edge because of his size. But let's also not forget he got the safety in Jacksonville. And that's obviously a big loss, but I think what it does also is it opens the door for Isaiah McGuire, the second-year defensive end, to really start to have an impact of his own. I mean, he had the forced fumble that set up that scoop and score by Rodney McLeod. He also had a big hit on special teams earlier in that game. I think this is a chance for him to really step in now and show why, he was thought of pretty well coming out of Missouri. Why I think, when he got drafted, I thought that was good value where the Browns were able to get him, at pick 126 in last year in the 2023 draft. Now's a chance for him to really show what he's capable of, and the Browns are going to need him.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. We'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason when we return. Stay with us.
You know what I think? I don't think you have the stones.
Oh, I've got the stones. I think you're the one that don't have the stones.
Let's settle this once and for all.
Amble up to the 4 new Ohio Lottery scratch-offs with all kinds of stones. Gemstones, diamond, emerald, sapphire, and ruby 10s. $10 each. 10 times multipliers. 2 fast spots for quick draw wins of up to $100 and a $500,000 grand prize. Which one will you get when you order them up? Well, that's just the luck of the draw.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, how come it is that all the experts all see the same thing except for everybody in Cleveland and offers their suggestion? Move on from Watson. He stinks. But hell, you guys make excuses and just think this guy's going to eventually turn it around. It's been 3 years. He's done nothing. The team is split. The fan base is split. The ownership is idiotic if they think that this guy is the answer. They should know by now this was a huge blunder. Plus, it's a black guy for the team, a black guy for the league, and we're never going to get any breaks from the refereeing because of this guy and the track record that he has. He's a predator. Just get rid of this guy. It's only pride money at this point.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Tim, the national media has an axe to grind with him. That's fine. I can't tell anybody what to do. It's not looking great, but he is playing better.
Yeah, and I think we'll talk about this later, but I think the last two games they aren't entirely on Deshaun Watson. Could he have played better the last 2 weeks? Absolutely. I think we can all agree that the week one game against Dallas, he wasn't good in that game. I don't think there's any denying that. But again, I talked about it earlier, if that ball doesn't bounce off Amari Cooper's chest and hit him right between the numbers and turn into an interception, Watson has a clean game. If Nick Harris doesn't get called for that holding penalty, that's an 82-yard touchdown he has. Suddenly he's got his first 200-yard game of the season. Suddenly he has his first real signature play as a member of the Browns. And I think what gets lost in this, and what I think I want to tell people, is the vast majority of quarterbacks that I've ever played, they need the help of people around them. There's only a handful of quarterbacks ever that could be great regardless of who's around them. And really Patrick Mahomes right now, maybe Josh Allen's getting in this category. The only guys that can be successful without the talent around them being really good. It's just the nature of football. Like Urban Meyer once said, the quarterback is the product of everybody around him. As much as, the quarterback position, the importance of it can't be overstated. They can't do it by themselves. They can't make the catches. They can't block for themselves. It takes the entire offense running cohesively to be successful. And by and large, through 4 games in a season, there really has not been many consistent stretches within games where everything has been clicking. And that's the reason why the Browns offense is struggling and why they're 1-3.
Deshaun Watson earlier this week talked about what it would mean to get David Njoku back on the field for this offense.
I mean, it'd be big for this offense. I think he's a big part of this system, exactly what we want to do and what we was planning to do, with the start of the season. But I know he's been out for the last couple of weeks, and, it'd be good to have him back. We'll see how this week goes, and we'll definitely be excited if he can make it to the game. So he's definitely a big part of this system and what we want to do offensively.
And we've talked about it, Tim. It would help the run game and the pass game. So Njoku's a guy they were counting on, and he hadn't been there. He's been injured.
Yeah, obviously, when you get a Pro Bowl player like David Njoku back, it really does free a lot of things up. And even looking at his first game before he got injured, 4 catches, 44 yards, he had a 29-yard gain. When you add that pass catching threat in the middle of the field, it certainly makes a quarterback's life easier. And obviously, we've seen the drop-off at the tight end position of the Browns. Jordan Akins certainly solid, but he's not a number one. And then they had to go to Blake Whitehart at times against the Raiders. I know Whitehart caught his first NFL touchdown, his first 2 catches in that game. But there's just no replacing a David Njoku and the kind of impact he has. You want to talk about taking pressure off of Amari Cooper. You get David Njoku back out there whenever he's healthy. That would be important for the Browns, just so you can't really focus as much on Amari Cooper. Now there's another Pro Bowler you have to worry about out in the pattern, and that kind of potentially frees things up. And also, we know his physicality in the run game has continued to improve throughout his career, and just the struggles they've had to create any holes in the run game, any variety in the run game. You need all the healthy blocking players that you can get.
All right, before we go to break, you wrote an article, Truth or Fiction. One of the points in it, the Browns have let Deshaun Watson down the last 2 weeks. Truth or fiction?
I think that's true. That to me is a fact. I think even you look at take Pro Football Focus grades with a grain of salt, but Watson was in the 80s this week for PFF grade. There were a lot of people saying Deshaun Watson actually had a good week of football. People that pay attention to this stuff, and I think that's true. Because again, we've talked about it twice, that interception he had. That's right on the chest of Amari Cooper. You expect him to make that catch 99 times out of 100, and then we're not talking about Deshaun Watson having another turnover in that game. We're talking about just 2 interceptions on the season as opposed to 3. Going back to the Giants game, that Cedric Tillman drop on 4th down that hits him right between the 1 and the 9 in the chest. He makes that catch. They keep that drive going, and who knows how that game turns out. And again, we talked about the defensive issues stopping the Raiders and what was a historically poor running game coming into that, the issues they've had tackling, the issues the Browns have had protecting Deshaun Watson, all those sorts of things. there's just been a lot of things going on that really, in some cases, haven't allowed Watson at times to have a chance of success. I look at the first half of the Giants game; he had no chance because of just they couldn't protect him. They couldn't run. They weren't running the football, and the coaches weren't calling plays to get the ball out of his hands quickly, to run a screen, do different things to try and mitigate the pass rush. So in some ways, yeah, Watson needs to continue to play better, but again, when you have big plays and opportunities for big plays, you have to make them. You can't have drops in those situations when you simply need a catch. You can't have a holding penalty when Watson makes an incredible play to get open, to get out of trouble and throw an 82-yard touchdown pass to a wide open Amari Cooper. Those are things that just can't happen. And also the missed extra point by Dustin Hopkins. If he makes that extra point, we're not even talking about 4th and 3 because Dustin Hopkins would just make that field goal. And then all of a sudden, maybe that game goes to overtime. So it's just a lot of things that have happened around Deshaun Watson that have not gone well. It's just been a series of, to borrow the title of that children's book series, it's been a series of unfortunate events. Yeah, Watson's got to be better, but bottom line, everyone else has to be. That's a big reason why they're 1 and 3. Nobody's been good enough consistently.
Yeah, the criticism that I think is valid of Deshaun Watson the last 2 weeks, he had the ball in his hand at the end of the game and was unable to make the play to win the game. And you and I have talked, and I've said this, ball in your hand, end of the game, find a way to win the game, that makes you an elite quarterback. He hasn't done that the last 2 weeks. And I mean, there's been reasons, but you got to do that, and you got to win football games when they're there at the end of the game. Tim Bielik from cleveland.com, Plain Dealer and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer at cleveland.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, guys. During the summer, me and some other callers all said about holding players accountable. Your answer was it's a different era nowadays. Nobody does that. Okay, well, how about on the other hand, if they're going to get paid anyway and nobody's going to hold them accountable for nothing, when you're winning, everything is great. When you're losing, how does your coach keep the team together? Ours don't. All he does is sit there and say, I expect. You don't win by an I expect. Because if that person doesn't go out there and play well, I expect them to do better next game. Well, by that time, we're 1-16, season's over. It's his job to make it better. I will continue to argue this point about our coach until they do something about him or he does something. Because right now, this team is a debacle, and we're not going anywhere, guys. Take care.
As always, we appreciate the voicemails. So I can't argue about the job of a coach is to keep the team together, but they started 5 quarterbacks last year and made the playoffs. I mean, I'm not quite sure what you want them to do like that. Now, they were winning, I will give you that, but 5 different quarterbacks they started, 4 of them in games that mattered, and they made the playoffs and won 11 games. This guy deserves a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, and you don't want to give him any. Now, again, I've said this, and I said they don't do it publicly. They hold them accountable, but they don't do it publicly. That was what I said. So don't misrepresent that. I said, they don't hold them accountable. You don't scream at them in public. You hold them accountable in meetings and those kind of things. I'm not in the meeting rooms. Maybe you're right. My thought and what I have heard is that he does hold those guys accountable. But I digress. They have an opportunity right here. We'll find out. If they lose 3, 4 more in a row, you can call back and say he didn't rally his team. If he starts winning games and they get back to 3-3 or 4-3, you need to call back and say, hey, he rallied his troops.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is also accountability that has to come from the players. On the play that I keep thinking about when it comes to that, Deshaun Watson and Jameis Winston both really getting after DeJuan Jones after that third down when he gave up the pressure and Watson wasn't able to complete a pass to, I think it was to Amari Cooper or Elijah Moore down the field. I don't remember exactly which one, but you saw both guys really get after DeJuan Jones and making sure that and really let him know like you got to play better than that. I think that's where the best accountability comes from is the players holding themselves accountable, holding themselves to a standard. Just 'cause, again, like you said, just because we don't see it that often in practice or in games doesn't mean it's not happening. And the caller was talking about Kevin Stefanski saying, "I expect, I expect." Holding standards is about accountability. That's the definition of accountability is having a standard and holding those players to it. Now you can say they're not playing well, they're not playing clean. That's 100% true. And that's got to get better. And you would assume that obviously, they can figure it out, but I think you can also say, as much as this team struggled, the coaches haven't had a great first 4 weeks of the season. They've taken offensively, they've taken too long, it seems, to make adjustments. The defense seems like it's still struggling with the same things it was a year ago, and really getting a strong effort too late in a lot of circumstances and not being able to really pick things up in the middle of the game to the point where you have to essentially play from behind and where you have to recapture momentum at the end of the game. You're just not able to do that.
Yeah, and again, I guess what I'm saying is the days of screaming at a player and grabbing him by the face mask, those don't exist. Accountability takes a different form. And again, we're not going to know. You might not like that answer, but you're not going to know because it would happen in meeting rooms and behind closed doors. That's the way they choose to do their business. Now, they haven't done anything well. They haven't coached well. They haven't played well. I won't argue that. If you're asking me, do I think the first 4 weeks have been good? They've been horrible. This team has to go. They're now mediocre, if you will. They've made the playoffs to the next step, and it's a challenge to Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry, be a perennial playoff team. They're not there yet. They're not there yet. I will give that to the detractors of Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry. They need to get there. If they don't, they're going to find some other guys that'll have those jobs.
Yeah, and these were, like we said, 2 games that on paper you look at before the season, you're like, they should win these games. I know the Browns have had a tricky history with the Raiders, but to let the Giants come in week 3 and Daniel Jones has almost a perfect first half, and Malik Neighbors goes off. They can't seem like they seem like they have trouble blocking that Giants defensive front for about 3/4 of the game. It just comes down to just really nobody on this team has been consistently good enough to get the job done 4 weeks in. I mean, you still got 13 games. There's still time to turn around, but it really starts now, especially with this tough stretch of the schedule coming up. The easy part of the schedule that we thought was going to be easy is over, and because of Washington becoming what it is now, that easy portion of the schedule shortened up by a week.
Yeah, and again, Browns' margin for error is pretty much gone with their losses the last 2 weeks. Again, from your Fact or Fiction article, Browns are closer to picking in the top 5 next spring than being a playoff team. Fact or fiction?
Fact. And I think, again, we talked, just mentioning it, the fact that the easy part of the schedule we thought was going to be 5 weeks, it's now 4 weeks because Jane Daniels of the Washington Commanders looks like is the offensive rookie of September, for me at least. I mean, he's been sensational. I mean, you talk about a guy who's completing better than 80% of his passes through 4 weeks of the season. I know the Browns are going to be the toughest defense he's faced this season, but the bottom line is Jane Daniels has been sensational. And then after that, you're in Philadelphia. Then you host the Bengals, Ravens, and Chargers in the 4 weeks after that. And you can make a case that going to Philadelphia is going to be you can make a case for that being the easiest game of this 5-week stretch. So the Browns, for a team that really just hasn't done much of anything consistently well for 4 weeks, that's a big reason why they're 1-3. And even looking at tankathon.com, which they keep track of the stuff with the draft order. If the season ended right now, the Browns would be picking 5th. It's been a long time since the Browns have been picking that early. But bottom line, this team has underperformed. I don't think there's any question about that, especially against weaker competition. Now it's about to get tougher. How do they respond? They certainly have the talent to respond and turn it around, and maybe they go home against the Bengals and they're 3-3, and all of a sudden we're talking about maybe they found something. They were able to turn around. But the bottom line, they got to show it on the field because right now they look like a team that's a top 5 pick team and not a team that's contending for a playoff spot.
Yeah, I would agree. There's no identity on offense yet. Could there be one? Maybe. And also, the defense has not played as well as we thought it would. I don't debate that. Who's to blame? I don't know. I don't know that you can blame one person, one facet. You better fix it, or there's going to be people that'll find people to blame.
Yeah, I even said this after week 1. I think collectively, everybody in this team can look at themselves in the mirror and be like, I need to be better. I think there's every single player on that team can say that. I don't know if there's one player, or anything that can say 4 weeks into the season that I've done good enough. And I mean, when you're a 1-3 football team, that's the unfortunate reality is guys aren't doing good enough. And then different parts of the game are breaking down. The defense not being able to tackle well the last couple of weeks in particular. They don't look anything like the defense we saw a year ago. They can still get close to that. We know defense is hard to sustain year to year, but bottom line, they're not playing up to their standard. We know they can be better. We've seen them be better. It's just on them to just simply be better to a man.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out of the break. We'll hear from Jim Schwartz about Jaden Daniels. We'll also turn our attention to the Commanders matchup. What the Browns need to do to get a win? Sports4CLE. I'll be right back. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Browns defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz today talking about what he sees in the Commanders' rookie quarterback, Jaden Daniels.
I mean, he just has really good command. I mean, what, they punted 4 times in 4 games, 2 games haven't punted. I mean, that'll get your attention really quickly. He's been very efficient with the ball. He really understands the RPO, zone read world. It's not, I mean, something he's done. Played a lot of college football in a very similar situation, so you see that comes up, and his legs, make a difference. We're going to do 3rd down today, and, he's converted, somewhere in the neighborhood of like 40% of their 3rd downs on scrambles, so it just adds a little bit more, and he hasn't made mistakes with the football. He's playing really well for a rookie. We got to play tight coverage. We got to be in our gaps, and we have to tackle well on the perimeter, and they'll challenge all of those things.
Tim, you listen to everybody talk about Jaden Daniels, and there's a lot to be concerned with if you're the Browns defense, because mobile quarterbacks were an issue last year when they were playing so well. Guys that do the zone read really, or the RPO, that's another concern. So they're hitting all the concerned areas at once with Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, and this matchup, honestly, for the Browns couldn't have come at a worse time, considering they're obviously not in good form coming into this game. And I think you do have to give Jaden Daniels a lot of credit. I remember saying draft day I would have taken Drake May 2nd overall instead of Jaden Daniels. He's proven me wrong so far. I mean, the biggest thing with Jaden Daniels, I mentioned the hyper accuracy, 82.1% completion rate. That's absurd for the NFL when you see guys typically get in the low 70s. I'm talking 82.1%. So the ball's never hitting the dirt with Jaden Daniels in the ball game. He's just hyper accurate, and he rushes for 54.5 yards a game. So he's a true dual threat. And, he's brought a lot of life into that team. He's exactly what you hope you get when you draft a quarterback in the top 3 of a draft. He's exactly what the Commanders, I imagine, have to be hoping for. And he's a big reason why they're 1 win away from matching their win total of a year ago.
All right, so this is from the 33rd team. Those are former player personnel executives, former front office types. Passer ratings on throws of 10-plus yards this season. Daniels is best in the NFL, 122.6, just ahead of Purdy and Allen. Deshaun Watson down at 26th, 58.9. Again, he's not throwing downfield as much. A lot of his are shorter passes, but to your point, they're shorter passes where he's getting the ball accurately in space, in stride, on time, and it's like an extension of the running game, and it's a problem for defenses.
Yeah, I mean, it helps in the passer rating when you don't turn the ball over, and I wrote about it and talking about my preview of the Commanders. They do not turn the football over. Jane Daniels has one turnover in 4 games. One, and that came last week against Arizona, and the first interception of his career. I mean, that's amazing for a rookie quarterback to go your first 4 starts with only 1 interception. Compare that to the Browns, where Deshaun Watson's got 3 interceptions. He had 2 against the Cowboys. He had the 1 against the Raiders last week, which admittedly wasn't his fault. But it's amazing when you have a young quarterback who's that accurate, where in a game that, there's rookie quarterbacks got to adjust to the speed of the game, that you only throw 1 interception. And of all the fluky things that can happen in a game, a ball could take some weird bounces in the air, take some weird deflections. The fact that hasn't happened, and he's only thrown 1 interception in his entire career to this point, I mean, that should get your full attention if you're the Browns defense.
All right, you mentioned the article that you wrote. 3 things to know about the Commanders. Number 1, Jaden Daniels, best rookie in the NFL right now. Number 2, Washington's skilled players are really helping Daniels. And number 3, don't count on getting takeaways. So take us through those. And you kind of alluded to the takeaways before I asked you this question about the article.
Well, so we've already kind of touched on Jane Daniels, why I think why he's so tremendous right now in the takeaways. So we'll just go right to number 2 in the skill players for Washington. I think they've had some good skill players for a while. They've just kind of been, not talked about, obviously, because they haven't gotten great quarterback play the last couple of seasons. Brian Robinson Jr., the former Alabama running back, I mean, this guy is just a pain to tackle. Look at his numbers: 66 carries, 307 yards, 3 touchdowns, almost 5 yards a carry. I mean, this is a very physical running back. And he's also got some pass catching ability, 68 yards receiving. They signed Austin Eckler, and he's obviously played pretty well. I know he's getting up there in age, but you still got to worry about Austin Eckler. And then the receiving game, Terry McLaurin, maybe the best receiver that nobody talks about. He has had 152 yards catching, 2 touchdowns the last 2 weeks. They added another veteran tight end in Zach Ertz. So you look at what Washington has done. They've surrounded Jane Daniels with some pretty good skill players to really take some pressure off him. And right now, those guys are performing. I mean, even last week, they got 2 touchdowns from Jeremy McNichols, who had 1 touchdown his entire career prior to last week, and he was drafted in 2017. So they're getting tremendous play from the talent around Jaden Daniels, And I think that's the difference between these 2 teams is, Washington has been able to support its quarterback. Obviously, Jane Daniels has played much better than Deshaun Watson. I'm not going to dispute that. But the thing is, the guys around him are making plays, and they're being consistent. The Browns just aren't getting that. And so you have to give offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury a lot of credit for creating a scheme where Jane Daniels feels very comfortable. He's making plays, and then the guys around him are performing at a pretty good level.
All right, before I let you go, what do the Browns need to do to get a win to get to 2-3? What does it look like if they're going to go into Washington and beat the Commanders?
I think the line play on both sides of the ball has got to be really good. I think if you're the Browns, you have to obviously be more physical up front defensively than they were a week ago against the Raiders, because the Raiders had like I said, came in that game with a historically poor running attack. That's not the problem with Washington. They're 3rd in the NFL in rushing yards, 6th in rushing yards per attempt. So they are moving the ball very well on the ground. So you have to find a way to try and make Jane Daniels as one-dimensional as possible and live with the results. If you can kind of contain him kind of the same way they've been able to do at times for Lamar Jackson, where they make him as one-dimensional as they can, that's the best you got to hope for. You got to defend him in a lot of ways, similar to how you defend Lamar Jackson, except I think Daniels at this stage is a better passer than Lamar was as a rookie. So that's the biggest thing there. Second, you got to take advantage of Washington's bad run defense. Again, 31st in the NFL in rushing yards per attempt offensively. The Browns got to be able to find a way to run the football, and they got to find a way to find the ability to stick with it, because bottom line, they haven't been able to do that. I think part of it might be obviously getting some guys back. If they can get Jedrick Wills, Jack Conklin back, if they get David Njoku back, then I would imagine the run game instantly becomes much better because you have better blocking. And the third thing, I can't remember where I saw this stat, so I apologize who I'm not giving credit for. They got to make things happen on first down. I believe I saw they're dead last in the NFL at 2.9 yards per first down. When you're constantly putting yourself in second and long, third and long, then that gets you into a lot of trouble. We've seen that all season long, where the Browns just aren't starting series off well. They're hitting short. They're not completing short passes. They're not running the ball well enough on first down. They're going backwards. When you talk about having success on first down, I always think about the success rate. Can you get 40% of what you need on first down? The Browns just haven't done that consistently. So they simply have to be more effective on first down, because if you're getting in the third and long, there's a reason for it, and it's because you're not getting enough done on first down to put you in that hole. And good NFL defenses, any NFL defense, is going to punish you if you keep backing yourself up in the second and long or third and long because you weren't able to set a tone on first down.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, as well as cleveland.com, as always. Great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Tim.
Thanks for having me, guys. Have a good day.
All right, Tim Bielik. Make sure you check him out. Pages of the Plain Dealer, as well as cleveland.com. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we continue talking Browns. Dalton Wasserman from PFF will join us. Sports4CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Sports4CLE continues. We continue talking Browns. New offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey asked about what David Njoku could bring to this offense when he returns.
Dave's a big piece, you know. I mean, and you know, he's a great football player who does a lot for us, you know, in a lot of different areas, whether it's pass game, protection, run game. Gives us a lot of flexibility. I do think those guys have really stepped up, and the guys we've added, I think AB's done a great job in bringing those guys in, guys who are smart, tough, and dependable that we can rely on during this stretch. You know, but obviously mixing Dave back in with those guys, it can help us, and because he's a playmaker for us in a lot of different areas.
With that, let's welcome in Dalton Wasserman. He's PFF data analyst, also co-host of the PFF College Football Show. Dalton, Browns need some playmakers on offense. You know, Cooper hasn't played well. I mean, nobody would argue that. Njoku out, Chubb out. Those are your top three, and they're just not getting much from them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the Browns aren't getting a whole lot from any of their wide receivers. We've seen some flashes from Jerry Jeudy, but you still have guys like Elijah Moore and Cedric Tillman not giving them a whole lot right now. So when you look at the one thing, the problem with the Browns offense outside of the offensive line injuries is they just don't make a ton of explosive plays, right? And Njoku is a guy who's capable of doing that from the tight end spot. If he can give them that and give them kind of a second threat to get some pressure off of Amari Cooper and Jerry Jeudy, I think it really helps him, especially when you think about Njoku being that threat up the seam and on the inside, and Cooper and Jeudy being the threats on the outside. They need a little more balance in their offense, and they need to find explosive plays.
Yeah, without question. The other thing I think that's underrated about what they're missing with Njoku out, he's really good in the run game, and their run blocking has not been good.
Yeah, it's another part where the injuries are playing a part, and we're so used to the Browns' offensive line and the run blocking, especially being top of the line, right? This was always the one thing you could rely on, that even when Nick Chubb was hurt last year, they could still run block well, especially on the interior, and you could get guys like Jerome Ford going this year, Deontay Foreman going, but right now it's not working as well as it should. And I don't think they're using it as often as they should either. Look, last week against the Raiders, in a game where they were spotted a 10-0 lead, they only ran 15 design run plays the entire game. So I think Kevin Stefanski really needs to lean on it more, because this is how this team has to win ball games, right? And I know they're not creating a lot of explosives in the run game, but when you don't have an explosive passing game, and Deshaun Watson's played a little bit better the last 2 weeks, this is a team that needs balance, and they need to lean on the run. They need this offensive line, whoever's in there, they need him to play a little bit better. I know injuries are tough, but they have to play this game where they just move the chains and find multiple ways to move the chains, because they're not a team with a ton of speed and a ton of explosiveness.
So this is concerning. It's the only way to describe it from the Browns' perspective. Offensive supporting cast rankings in terms of average PFF rush, receiving, pass blocking, and run blocking grades. Everything except passing, weeks 1 through 4. Ravens, tops in the NFL. Lions 2, Vikings 3, Eagles 4. Commanders, who the Browns will play, 7th. The Browns are dead last behind the Raiders, Chargers, and Patriots. That kind of goes to what we are saying. They're not getting any explosive plays. They're not even giving themselves the opportunity to get explosive plays.
Yeah, it's a real problem. And I think the most concerning thing with the Browns for me is actually the last 2 weeks in these losses to the Giants and the Raiders. Deshaun Watson's played pretty well. He was really good under a lot of pressure against the Giants, and he put up an 88.5 passing grade for us this week against the Raiders, which is a spectacular mark. If your quarterback grades that high, you need to win ball games. And right now, you're not getting the support, right? And then there's just moments in games where things just come apart on him, right? You talk about the long Amari Cooper touchdown that should have given him the lead. You get a holding penalty there. You're working with backups up front. Wyatt Teller's on injured reserve now. The entire thing now around Deshaun Watson is coming apart too, even as Watson is admittedly playing a little bit better. I know we talked about him earlier in the season, be like, oh, we might not see that guy again, but now that he's playing better and the supporting cast is losing their footing, is a real well-rounded problem here with the Browns offense right now. And regardless of who's playing well and who's not, they're not scoring a lot of points. So they need – it's tough with backup offensive linemen, but they need to start playing better, and they need these guys on the outside to start making plays.
And, it's kind of the complementary thing, too. The defense isn't doing as much as it needs to do. The problem is, and I think it's why Browns fans are so upset, you look at it and it's like, well, if you fix this, you still have to worry about this, this, and this. It's not one thing. It's not one player. So the fix, it's not going to be easy.
No, there's not a one Band-Aid solution here, absolutely. And you talk about complementary football and complementing your defense, and right now they're not, right? They're not running the ball well. They're not making explosive plays. They're not getting enough first downs, especially as the game goes on. I think one of the themes in these last 2 games is got off to good starts. You even got your defense a lead. But you have to sustain drives and score more points and stay on it. It's so hard for a defense to win if you're only scoring 15 points a game. It puts so much pressure on them. And I know there's a ton of talent on their defense, but if they're out there and they're out there on the field for 35, 36 minutes and they're out there for a lot of plays and you're going 3 and out, it wears your defense out, even one as good as the Browns, right? And I think a big element to this game against the Raiders was the Raiders had their season best rushing performance, and the Browns really did nothing on the ground, and the Raiders were the ones sustaining drives, even if they weren't finishing drives with touchdowns, right? The Raiders were sustaining drives. They were keeping the Browns defense on the field, and no matter how good your defense is, if they're gassed, they're gassed, and they're going to have issues when they're gassed.
So here's a look at the highest graded Browns PFF grades in Week 4 against the Raiders, and we've talked about it. Deshaun Watson graded out the highest, 86. Devin Bush, 77.1. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, 74.8. Jerome Ford, 74.3. And Myles Garrett basically playing on half a leg since both his feet are banged up, limited snaps, 71.8. When you look at those grades, what grades in the 70s, what do those tell you when you look at that?
So grades in the 70s and 80s are obviously very good. I mean, if you get grades in the 70s, you're talking about like above average, right? I would say average and guys who don't really have much of an effect, they have kind of a neutral effect on the game, or in the low 60s, like 60 to 65. If you're in the 70s and high into the 70s, you're a plus contributor. The one thing that sticks out to me there is, yes, Myles Garrett actually grading a 71.8 is lower than he usually would. There's a lot of games in the 90s for him because he's one of the best players in football. But I really need to focus on the rest of this defensive line here because he's not getting a whole lot of help. And it's showing me that if Myles Garrett isn't at an elite level, Well, they're going to struggle because the rest of their defensive line did not show up. Garrett had 5 pressures and 2 sacks included in there. The rest of the team had 5 pressures altogether and only hit Gardner Minshew once. So you're really looking at a defensive line in the passing game where your pass rush was one-dimensional in this game against the Raiders. And then the run defense, outside of the forced fumble that they returned for a touchdown, which is admittedly a huge play that got them back in the game, outside of that one play, they didn't do a whole lot. Their run defense grade on their D-line outside of that play was like a 55, which is not good. Then you start getting into negative territory. So they need the rest of – as great as Garrett is and as great as we know he can be as a future Hall of Famer, if he's going to be injured and out there playing at 80%, they need more help on this defensive line. They got out-physicaled in this game against the Raiders, and the Raiders came into this game not being able to run the ball at all.
Yeah, I think it was the 3rd worst rushing attack in the NFL, and they ran for over 150 yards. What else grabbed your – was it the D-line that really grabbed your attention with that Browns-Raiders game, or is there something else?
It's really trench play on both sides. It's the defensive line, like we just talked about, and the offensive line with the injuries. And look, their original starting 5 that the Browns had was very, very good when they're all healthy. But, you know, you lose especially Wyatt Teller on the inside. You can start to feel it now with all these offensive line injuries. We've talked about Jedrick Wills before. Jack Conklin's a veteran guy who's injured. They are just losing pieces on this offensive line left and right. And teams with bad offensive lines, no matter how they got there, are really going to struggle to win. I mean, we see it every year with certain teams. I see it in Jacksonville right now, as for an example. It's just very hard to win if you don't block people. And I'm seeing the Browns in the past 5 years or so, we've seen where they've been so good in the trenches on both sides of the ball that's what won them games and got them to the playoffs. Right now, they're not good on either side outside of Myles Garrett, and it's really hurting them.
When you look at it, how do you get it turned around? What? And again, I know it's not a snap your fingers, it's not a magic. How do you at least you get a win and you're 2-3, and then you feel a little bit better because you go into Philly and you beat Philadelphia? Not easy, but then you can see 500 again.
Yeah, I think defensively it's just a matter of they have to play better. I mean, it sounds cheesy, but there was times last year where they didn't take the show on the road with them, and they only played elite defense at home. The defensive line has a boatload of talent. Most of it's healthy. I know Garrett, even at 80%, I would take him over the vast majority of guys in the league. But the D-line just has to be better. They have to assert themselves more. Offensively, I think I hate to say it, but it's going to be about simplifying the game plan and finding just what this given unit every week can do up front. And again, Watson's playing well. Maybe you have to run to the outside more. Maybe you have to get more screens. You got to take some things out of the offensive line's hands, because if you're asking a backup offensive line to dominate, they're not going to do it every single play. Simplify it. Get the ball in space. Get the ball to your athletes. Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore, Jerome Ford. I mean, and David Njoku coming back. These are good players on the outside. Get them the ball in space. Don't ask your offensive line to do too much.
Dalton Wasserman, PFF data analyst, co-host of the PFF College Football Show, and I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out, other side of the break, turn our attention more to that matchup with the Commanders. Also talk a little college football. Sports4CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
You know what I think? I don't think you have the stones.
Oh, I've got the stones. I think you're the one that don't have the stones.
Let's settle this once and for all.
Amble up to the 4 new Ohio Lottery scratch-offs with all kinds of stones. Gemstones, diamond, emerald, sapphire, and ruby 10s, $10 each. 10 times multipliers, 2 fast spots for quick draw wins of up to $100 and a $500,000 grand prize. Which one will you get when you order them up? Well, that's just the luck of the draw.
We continue talking Browns and football with Dalton Wasserman from PFF. Dan Quinn, new head coach of the Commanders, talked about what he sees when he looks at the Browns.
One thing that I really think about Cleveland that first comes to mind, like, this is a tough and resilient group. I think they kind of showed that last year to go through quarterback changes and injuries, and they had some of that, through the starting part of this year. And so I think that's one of the things that I look at first. Like, man, this is a tough and resilient group, and we know we'll get their best coming in this one, ready to fight for it, and they'll get ours as well. But no, nothing past that. Each game, matches up a little bit differently, and we know the strengths, where they're at, and that's why we're really looking forward to this battle. There's all sorts of cool matchups, including on special teams. I think these are two really effective cover units that have guys that'll battle for it. And I think Larry and Bubba, that not only they good special teams coaches, some of the best in the league, they were also like old teammates back in the day. So there'll be all these battles within the battle that I'm looking forward to.
Dalton, when you look at Dan Quinn, it's a guy that's a defensive coach, and to be honest with you, the Commanders' defense has struggled. What are some areas that the Browns need to take advantage of and win, if you will, if they're going to go into Washington and get a win?
This is the game where the Browns need to find and lean on their run game. I mentioned only 15 design carries last week in a game they were up 10-0. And I think Coach Quinn makes a very good point about them being resilient. I think the other thing, though, is in these two games against the Giants and the Raiders, they had a lead. And the Browns are realistically not a team that opponents want to fall behind with Myles Garrett and their pass rush, right? So I think the team that gets off to a good start in this game is going to still be at a big advantage. The Browns just need to score more and sustain offense as they get leads early in the game. But I think controlling the ball, maintaining possession, the Commanders have struggled in run defense, even as they've been winning. Keep the ball out of Jaden Daniels' hands. That's really the goal here. Do not let him all of a sudden pick up the pace and what they can do in Cliff Kingsbury's offense. The Browns need to get ahead early for a third straight week, and this time they need to pile on points, lean on their run game, win time of possession to keep it away from the Washington offense.
When you look at Jerome Ford, what have you seen from Ford?
Just look, he's effective. He can get you those 4 or 5 yards, but you're just not seeing the explosive plays. And I think that's the difference between him and Nick Chubb. And that's the difference between elite running backs and average running backs. Last week, he had the one big run for 35 yards with, I believe, 2 minutes left in the game that got him in position where they could have won it. But the Browns didn't have another 10-yard run the entire day. That was their only one they had all day. So you're seeing right now, I think he needs more missed tackles, right, in the run game and more explosiveness. And I know that's hard to say when you still don't have Nick Chubb, but they just need – it's not just, you think about explosive plays through the air and deep balls and all the fun stuff, but explosive 10-plus, 15-plus yard plays on the ground plays such a big hand in winning football games too, and the Browns aren't getting enough of that. If they can get a little more explosiveness out of Ford, like we saw in that one carry last week that almost got him into winning position and they just didn't finish – they need more of that against Washington, right? They need to be able to match Washington on the ground and get some of those chunk plays that coaches always talk about.
So other than the run game, when you look at Washington, what do the Browns do defensively to try to make sure Jaden Daniels doesn't go crazy?
I'm just very curious to see how Washington attacks the Browns front seven and Myles Garrett, and because what you're seeing – with Jaden Daniels, he's such a great athlete. I'm actually, for as much as the talk is about completion percentage and throwing the football, and he's been great throwing the football, no question, but the amount that he freezes backside defenders in the run game is something I'm curious about. I want to go back to last year when I believe it was Denver beat the Browns, and one of the problems in that game was Russell Wilson and the read option, and actually the Broncos' answer for Myles Garrett was to not block him at all. Let's make him the option guy and let him make his own decision. I wonder if there's something similar to that here with Washington. So I think actually the Commanders and their run game is just as big a problem with Jaden Daniels and Brian Robinson in the backfield and all of the things they can do and everything that Daniels' athleticism allows them to do in the run game. I think it's a huge key because, again, we saw the Browns struggle against the run game against the Raiders, but that's a more traditional run game. Now you've got a whole different animal with Daniels there. So I'm curious to see, again, I need to bounce back from the Browns' defensive line, and I want to see where they go strategically handling the option game with Daniels.
All right, before I let you go, you do a lot of college football work. What games have you excited and intrigued this weekend in college football?
Two big ones. I'll start there in your neck of the woods with Ohio State and Iowa. It is Ohio State's first real test of the year, and Iowa, look, they're always really good on defense, and they've got a spectacular running back named Caleb Johnson, who's second in the country in rushing right now. I see Iowa covering. It's a 19 or 20 point spread in favor of Ohio State right now. I don't think it should be that wide. I think Iowa's offense is significantly better than last year, and their defense is still really good. That's going to be a fun game. And then one in the SEC, Missouri going down to Texas A&M is a fun one at Kyle Field. Missouri coming off a bye week, but they have yet to play their best football, even though they're 4-0. They need to execute better or they will lose this game. This is really, I think, a line of demarcation for Missouri as to whether they're a playoff contender or they're just a pretty good team. This is a huge game for them down at A&M.
Yeah, Missouri is one of those teams that, they joined the SEC and it looks like they're ascending dramatically relative to their football program.
Yeah, absolutely. They are ascending. They had a big ascent last year, finishing in the top 10, getting a bowl win over Ohio State was huge for the program. But again, they're right now they're 4-0, and on the surface, all the stats look great. They're not playing their best football. If Missouri does play their best football, they're one of the 8 or 10 best teams in the country, but we've yet to see that. They need to bring it this week in a tough environment. And Texas A&M, have had some quarterback switches and injuries and things happening, and they're kind of still trying to find their wheelhouse under Mike Elko. But this is a game I think that's a good barometer for both teams to see where they're at. Missouri is ascending, absolutely, but how far up can they ascend and can they execute on a better level than they have lately?
Who's impressed you with Ohio State? You mentioned the Ohio State, Iowa, and in this area, former MAC head coach Tim Lester is now the Hawkeyes offensive coordinator. Who's impressed you with the Buckeyes?
Well, it has to be first. It has to start with Jeremiah Smith, right? The receiver, the true freshman receiver. He's a freak of nature. He's gotten Julio Jones and AJ Green comps. He's amazing, and he's such a huge X factor, I think, for this race for the national title. Because there was a question. Man, we just lost Marvin Harrison Jr. What are we going to do? Well, apparently the answer came in a true freshman, and Smith has been amazing. And then defensively, just how well-rounded their defense is. Guys like Jack Sawyer playing great. Lathan Ransom on the back end is our highest-graded safety in the country right now. And if I was picking someone for Ohio State preseason that would have taken that title, I would have picked Caleb Downs, but you've got him and Ransom playing great on the back end. But, I mean, the headline right now is Jeremiah Smith at receiver. It's just freakish what he can do out there, honestly.
Dalton Wasserman, PFF, as always. Great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Dalton.
Appreciate you having me on. Thanks.
Dalton Wasserman, PFF data analyst. He is also co-host of the PFF College Football Show. That'll do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.